Hi everyone, I'm Lucy.
And I'm Timur.
And we're here at GDC, continuing GameSpot's coverage of the Game Developers Conference. And joining us today from Zaum to talk about the newly announced C4, we have Cosmos. Welcome.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. We're really excited because obviously Disco Elysium was and is this incredible title. And we've been waiting to see what you've all been up to and what is next. Could you give us the elevator pitch or the quick run through of what exactly C4 is?
Yeah, absolutely. C4 is an espionage role-playing game in a completely original setting. We still ask important psychological questions pertaining to the self, identity, still our humor, our wittiness that we're known for. It's an espionage role-playing game inspired by the works of John le Carré, Ursula Le Guin, Philip K. Dick, and other of that nature, you know. And why espionage is because we kind of started to look into it and discovered quickly that the reality of espionage is much stranger than its fiction, you know. Espionage, all the successes in espionage come down to a couple of spies. Most are like really big f***ups actually.
Yeah.
Just a couple of weeks ago in Britain, they caught Aspiring, who had dubbed themselves the Minions, you know, after the popular children's cartoon. They had hidden cameras in Minion plushies. So There were some like transcripts of messages the spies exchanged, and one of them had an idea to like shoot someone using a drone, firing a poison dart. So that is the reality of espionage, you know.
Yeah. Obviously, like for a lot of people, at least in fiction and the way they consume espionage, it's a very, as you mentioned, glamorized version of it. So what is your kind of like idea behind it, and what are your touch points to kind of build on that?
Yeah, so we are very anti-power fantasy. We are not the James Bond, you know. There's no glamour in espionage, you know. I think John le Carré says it best, like, who worked in British intelligence as well before becoming an author, is that for a while he was wondering if these are just people pretending to be fools to deceive people, or are they fools pretending to be fools, you know, that everything smells of failure. You know, there is a lot of like ineptitude, there's a lot of luck. The spies themselves think that they're almost like magicians, you know, that they're doing something magical. And it all like kind of elicited a lot of curiosity to look deeper into like the genre, how it's perceived. You know, obviously there are a lot of like, let's say, Tom Clancy books and Ian Fleming's James Bond, you know, which is very like, you know, in the movies Jason Bourne as well, you know, but we wanted to stray from that because, you know, what being a spy and in our game an operand comes down to is like how well can you play a role that is not yourself, you know, like are we who we are we what we do, or are we who we present ourselves as, you know, questions I think each one of us can be asking.
And so in the game, are you playing as an original character? Are you playing as yourself, role-playing the role?
So I think that's a good question. It's like a good RPG makes, I think, a person forget that there's a computer between the player and the game world, you know, so yeah.
Right. In terms of, obviously, there's a lot of expectations from gameplay when it comes to being a spy, and generally I wouldn't say it kind of like translate to the kind of games that you make. It's very text and, you know, kind of interaction based instead of like firing loads of guns and that kind of stuff. So how do you make the act of being a spy feel good and satisfying in a kind of framework that you're known for, or are you changing that framework?
No, we still keep the framework of like, you know, making a new project with, you know, a new expanded team, you know, some people who have like worked on Disco Elysium, the Final Cut, and more people who just love Disco Elysium, you know, bring all of their like expertise. You know, we built this world for 3 years, you know, like started from like scratch, you know, to develop a world that we felt would be better for these ideas we are exploring, you know, for this project. So how do we get the espionage bits in there? It's a great challenge, you know, but I think it comes down to like identity and psychology, you know, like, and also kind of, if you think of a police officer and the police story, it's almost like a story of morality, what is right, what is wrong, what is justice, you know. But in the world of spies, it's much more murkier. There are no good or bad guys, you know, there's just interests, you know, there's ideology, there's money, maybe there's love. So to get these, like the feeling of being a spy across doesn't necessarily need you to like infiltrate a room with 10 terrorists and a silenced pistol in your hand.
Yeah.
There's all of the meeting up with assets, coded messages, evading tails, tailing others, all of this kind of, in a way, much more mundane, but also for us much more interesting, to explore that.
Yeah.
So obviously in Disco Elysium you had the thought cabinet was this real standout piece of the game that I and a lot of other people just really, it was kind of like this magical thing, and once you kind of figured out how it worked, it would be this core beautiful thing that you kept coming back to. Are you expanding on that in C4? Or?
Absolutely, and we have something we call ourselves like thought cabinet plus conditioning. This is also like we call our agents operands, and thought mechanics conditioning. It's an auto-operant conditioning from behavioral psychology. So conditioning is essentially thoughts that you gain. You can condition either by reinforcing them or punishing them. In Disco Elysium, you gain the thought, and since you're an alcoholic there, alcoholics have all the time in the world. So you can just cook these thoughts and wait for them to get ready. But as an operant, you are faced with challenges that may need like a quicker turnaround on your part. And there is a clear opportunity cost of like reinforcing a thought gives a certain benefit, punishing that thought gives another. If you would imagine there's a thought called the paradise of clean lungs, that you reinforce that I'm a non-smoker, and obviously non-smoking only has bonuses. If in the game you should then smoke, go against your conditioning, you will trigger something we call dissonance. That is, the game keeps track of what type of person you conditioned yourself to be for this assignment that you're undertaking. And then if you smoke, well, you're not who you said you were, so we're going to take away your bonuses and give you something else for a temporary amount of time.
Yeah, and that, I imagine, feeds into the narrative as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The balancing of like the self, the role that is undertaken, balancing like different, sometimes conflicting sets of allegiances.
Yeah.
It is all about like how to, because we think espionage is just one big exercise in keeping one's cool.
Yeah. I guess the other thing is like there's often the takeaway from or the format arc of an espionage story is the core focus is the completion of a mission and achieving an objective.
Yeah.
Whereas your games feel more like they're introspective. So in the game, is it like you're trying to do something and that's the end goal, or is it a case of like you're trying to show how a person changes and that's the real story here?
I think it can be both. We never conquer the mountain only ourselves. So whatever assignments we undertake, also we are different at the end of it. So absolutely, like the operant in the center of this journey, will go through transformation, as will the player behind the computer.
Okay. And how about the city? Can you tell us anything about that city? Because obviously Disco is known for having this incredibly deep world behind it, and you guys worked on that for a really long time, and it sounds like you've taken a similar approach here to make sure it's not like, puddle shallow deep, it's got that depth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, it's one city, we're playing in quite a large section of a city. So our philosophy is like, let's inches wide, miles deep, as we explore psychology as well. We spent a lot of time building it. We consulted an urban designer, urban planner, because if you look at cities, they kind of pop up in layers over history, money comes in, a new section is built, maybe some part is gentrified, all of these things kind of leave their socioeconomic mark on the people living there, So we used like a lot of our team's input, we have like a former textile factory, we have like a artist on the team who is actually a trained seamstress, and in fashion design, who could like provide this type of input, so they could like taking everyone's strengths and what we know best and putting it together almost.
You mentioned conditioning, and I'm interested in kind of other psychological touch points that you might be looking at adding to the game, because, hearing you talk about it, I'm thinking of things like authority and how you react to other people and other people's reactions to you, and kind of more like social psychology kind of thing. It made me feel more about psychology than I have in a very long time.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely, yeah, we're still very much deep into humans and what we think and how we perceive the world, and how certain events can make us perceive the world differently. We have some aesthetic touch points, that we kind of agreed upon, like someone being like that it has to be stupid, it has to be mundane, but also wondrous, melancholic, seedy. So like to kind of have this new genre, espionage, and that they don't do a lot in games, and if they do, it's mostly like a power fantasy, hiding in the shadows with lasers and night vision.
Yep.
That like to really explore like what it means, kind of, and also conditioning as well, like changing your mind is easy, but changing yourself is much harder, so like what's the opportunity cost for being who you want to be versus being who you have to be or being who you are,
Yeah. Obviously, there's a teaser out there that people can see, and it's like it's very focused on the art of the world.
Yeah.
How do you describe that art? Because I remember looking at a teaser and being like, I have no words to how to describe whatever this is, but it's like looks almost organic and human, but at the same time isn't that quite that.
How it is made by humans, absolutely.
Yeah.
No AI at our place. I would say like kind of. I've had a hard time finding an equivalent in English, but like I think the closest comes to just illustration, graphics, and not like computer graphics, but like what it was beforehand, before computers, like of these kind of thin lines, clear contours. I'm no artist, so I sadly cannot say like really eloquently explain, what it is, but I feel that we are doing something amazing. Those drawings there are done by Anton Will and Olesya Nazarenko. Anton Will also did Food Cabinet for Disco Elysium, so it's also interesting to see how like a different world, different genre of fiction kind of changes the art as well, so that's like one uniform package and that there are like no coincidences, right. Everything is intentional.
Awesome.
I suppose final question from me, obviously, what is the things that perhaps couldn't work in Disco Elysium or you just couldn't make happen that you've managed to be able to put into C4? Or were there any unexplored concepts, gameplay or narrative that you've kind of managed to adapt for this one?
I would say that one thing that nobody said in a review of Disco Elysium was that like there were too few words. There were a lot of words in Disco Elysium, so like we kind of for us in writing, we like kind of really tried to do by this mantra of like half as much, twice as good, of like writing, having the time to like really write and edit it to be at a level that we are happy with all across the board, and kind of telling, because the geography of the internet and everything has changed over the last years as well, back when we were doing Disco, the biggest thing was Twitter, now it's TikTok.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I remember speaking to the team a few years ago about that and mentioning that like the reason that it felt kind of antagonistic at times was because it was replicating Twitter, and that's why and so are you thinking about TikTok and kind of applying it in the same way, or is it's still antagonistic scrolling?
It's still antagonistic scrolling, in this way, like we can't like donate to the game to make like things happen faster. So like we're kind of supercharging like our efforts, like taking the Food Cabinet further, like spending time on it, like taking some of our dice mechanics a bit further, seeing like keeping what we felt was best, also like kind of some, how they say, establishing some stylistic standards in writing for what we exactly do, that the end result is like so much more clearer and like which also allows us to build more variability in there, more reactivity, like to have even more of this type of feeling that like god damn, this game knows everything I'm doing, which I like to think of it as sometimes it's like almost like a very slow moving slot machine, is that you do something and a couple of hours later, how do they know this, and like because in most games that I've played, it's very like binary. You see, this is the good option, this is the neutral option, this is the bad option. We really still want to like have the player have the option to express like their unfiltered thoughts, in the game world. I feel that was what made Disco really good. Is that all of these like let's say maybe controversial things you can say, but like you're able to say them because you can't say them in the real world.
This is a final question from me. I hate to try and find whether you're following trends or not, but it just occurred to me that your last game has 2 police officers in it, as one competent, one less competent. are you guys trying to create any sort of like broader universe around this? Because are any of the characters from Disco planning to show up in here?
No,
or
it's a
connectivity?
completely different world. This
Right.
does not take place in the world of Elysium. Like I think what is there is the psychology. And like let's say potentially a state-sponsored job. But that's where like kind of the in-world similarities and like we kind of have this wider perspective. We are able to also do like build like a more different city. We were in Tallinn making Disco Elysium, in Eastern European, one of Eastern European capitals. It's quite grim there. And it's evident in the art. We're a bit more spread out across the world, so we're kind of taking the best of what's there and putting it together.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming down. It's been wonderful speaking with you. For more from this year's GDC, make sure to stay tuned to GameSpot.